Claire, welcome. It's been a long time. It feels like a long time since the end of Llwyn Celyn. And I've just been re-listening to some of your audio pieces, which you made for us at the end of your residency, and which are playing in our little museum room in the Beast House. And the one that was really interesting to listen closely to again were the interviews with the craftsmen. And I guess my first question for you, when you started your residency, I know when you put your proposal in, it sounded absolutely lovely. And I was expecting, wonderful poems, which we had from you, but it was the way in which you sort of befriended the craft people and, really became part of that team that I think was really wonderful. And I wonder whether that's something you expected from the project when you started or not.
Absolutely not. I mean, I knew I wanted to get to know the house and to observe the changes, maybe to respond creatively to those. I also wanted to get to know myself a bit better, to take this time just being, listening. I wanted to do a lot of deep listening because I knew I wanted to make soundscapes or audio poems. So I had to hone my ear a little. But obviously, to get to know the house and the processes it was undergoing, I had to talk to the craftsmen. And the things that they would say were just so rich in metaphor and interesting, and things I never would have anticipated thinking about, and it was like a new language, and I just loved, talking about words and their accents as well. I loved their accents, and they were very gentle and passionate about this. They weren't just, they weren't people fixing a roof. These men had a definite feeling for this place, and it just, I was excited to talk to them, and it just put me in new directions. I really I'm grateful to them for that.
And I am too. I mean, I spend a lot of time on sort of landmark project sites, and sometimes you feel like a bit of a spare part. Sometimes, you don't quite know where to put yourself. But somehow at Llwyn Celyn, I, like you, just used to like sitting in the building and kind of absorbing what was going on. And I remember Simon, the carpenter in particular, who you could talk to Simon for hours. He was just so generous with his knowledge, and they were all like that, so deeply knowledgeable.
Deeply committed to, which I think is what the Landmark Trust is all about, is retaining this authenticity, is to allow the house to kind of unlayer rather than impose upon, and that was beautiful. And the biggest metaphor for that with me was at the very end, when all was done and I was surplus to requirements by that point, I visited, and Simon was there, and he said, come and see. And he'd noticed a heart carved into the door. Now, he'd been working in this room and on this door for, was it years? I think it was a few years. And he said, only now, when he took it off the hinges, held at a different light, did he see the heart. And I just thought that encapsulated everything, seen in a different light. It kind of was beating again. It was so beautiful. I adored that.
Yeah, there are lots of things in that house that you didn't notice until they'd been touched again by sort of a human hand and sort of lovingly repaired. And now it really does sing all of those. And I think for us, because we were there and witnessing all of it, it does have, it has a lot of meaning. I think it has a lot of meaning for anyone who goes there, but somehow for us, having witnessed all of that happening, you can't help but walk into those rooms and remember the moment that, the archway was revealed, or the, when the doors were waxed, or it's just full of memories for me. And the one thing that we talked about a lot and that really fascinated me, you mentioned the accents. It is borderland. So it is sort of Welsh, half English, and you're Welsh. And I wondered how you felt going there, because was it Welsh to you or was it English? It felt very Welsh to me.
No, absolutely. It didn't at all. It felt like I was going over the borders. I've got a strong Valleys accent anyway, but I feel like I'm a different Wales. I'm coal mining Wales. But what was really fascinating to me throughout the duration of the project is my auntie discovered that we were from farming stock not far from that area. So it was kind of like a homecoming without me knowing. And I adored being there, but it felt so distinct to where I'm from. And, you know, the journey there, Kasia, was part of the whole process. I think it would often take me an hour and a quarter to get there. And the road itself, I forget what it's called, being renovated for the whole 2 years. So there was another, you know, another richly symbolic thing that to get to this place, to get to understand this place, I had to go on this road, this journey. But towards the end, I felt like, because I'd explored Welsh, and at that point, it was 2016, 17, I hadn't done a lot in the Welsh language. And since this project, I've done quite a lot of work, and I've explored with using Welsh. And I know in a couple of my poems, I either translated them myself or I mixed up English and Welsh and got them translated. So from a language perspective, this was a really important project.
I was brought up in the Midlands, so for me, Wales for me was almost like this mythical place. And so, yeah, for me, there is a otherness to it and to that whole valley. And I know when you were spending time at Llwyn Celyn, you also did a lot of walking in that valley as well, didn't you, with some of the other artists in residence. So I think that was the nice thing about the project. There's quite a lot of sort of cross conversation between yourself as a writer and the visual artists who are working on site as well.
Yeah, particularly Torrell Brancher. I mean, she and I walked up the Skirrid, and for anybody who hasn't been to Llwyn Celyn yet, the house faces the Skirrid mountain, which is the sacred mountain, and she and I walked up there. And I've just been, in the last 2 days, rereading the journals I kept when I was in Llwyn Celyn, and I recorded the conversations, and I was getting goosebumps remembering, because as an artist and a photographer, she was telling me how to get into different levels, to worm level, and then of course we were bird level, and we were looking at our house as we, you know, we felt, I feel like you felt the same. From a different view, a different perspective, and just to gain another insight. And it was really deeply enriching. You know, you're talking to somebody who knows about bats one day, and then you're walking with an artist, and then you're talking to somebody who's building a wall. And it's just, it was such a beautiful, beautifully creative time. I miss it.
I love that thing about worm level and bird level. I think I spent most of my time at dirt level. I was always digging things up, although I had a site shed, and everyone would just sort of leave piles outside the door of the shed for me. And I still got boxes full of stuff that I don't know what to do with. Some of it is in the Beast House, you know, displayed. Yeah. We had volunteers who worked their way through everything and sort of chose what to display, which was really nice. But yeah, I did feel kind of physically, I felt very, very tired at the end of the project, because it's all on a very steeply sloping site, and yeah, trudging up and down. I don't know whether you remember the muddy winters up there, and that trudging. You had to, from the car park at the bottom of the hill, you had to trudge up to the building, didn't you? And then between the different ends of the site, you had to trudge up and down and up and down. And yeah, just that last bit of the journey in itself was lovely. And I remember you had a couple of really nice moments with the horses as well in the field, didn't you?
As I said, I was rereading everything I'd written, and the very first day I came, I was totally overburdened, literally in my head, in expectation, and I had all these bags full of things that I thought I needed to be this poet in residence. I had this idea of what that was, and really I didn't need any of it, and I fell right, and I had hands to put down, so I fell on my face, and the horses in the field in front of Llwyn Celyn came and had a good old look. And it was basically for me a process of unburdening and uncomplicating, and just, as I said before, that kind of sense of deep listening, and really, instead of imposing, like the craftsmen not imposing their will, I suppose, on the building, the house, I couldn't impose my vision, and I had to learn a few lessons where I had to just be a bit more open to what was around me, rather than trying desperately to craft it.
think when Torrell described her residency as well, she said a very, very similar thing. It's sort of about, you go into panic mode and thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to achieve? And then you almost tire yourself out from worrying or panicking or whatever. And then you have that moment, because you all had such a long time, you had 2.5 years on site, you could go through those different stages to, as you say, to the point where you can just sort of stop and sit and listen and be open.
And I have deep gratitude to you, because Kasia, because you allowed us, well, I can speak for myself, you allowed me to do and be and produce whatever. So constantly I was reading my journal, and constantly I have these waves of panic. What have I created? What have I, and then in looking back today, I see that I actually have a lot of material that I can now return to. And of course, as a result of this residency, I just, speaking to those craftspeople, and not only that, you had lots of open days and you had landscape study days. So I was meeting volunteers, and I was meeting artists and craftspeople, willow weavers and mask makers. And those conversations are really meaningful. And so I applied for funding, and I'm researching for a book now on the creative process, what I can learn about poetry through speaking to craftspeople in other disciplines, and that's all a direct result. So I was panicking that I didn't have a book of poetry, although I've looked and I have about 30 poets. They're not all of very good quality, but is that it has this enduring impact that's going to continue to affect me as an artist, and that's just, God, that's incredible.
That's really good. And again, it's a lovely thing that there is this legacy of the project. And yeah, as you say, it's a place that sort of brings people together. And the valley itself obviously has a really long legacy of artistic activity. Yeah, it's nice to see that Llwyn Celyn is continuing that, and certainly for yourself has sort of taken you in a direction that perhaps you never thought you'd go in, which is really great. And so how much more writing are you doing in Welsh? Is that something that...
Yeah, if I recently translated a poem, I translated some poems for the National Poet of Wales, and they were from Welsh into English. But recently I translated for a poet, his poem from English into Welsh, which was a little scary, but I did it and I enjoyed it. So it's giving me, again, another way of working, another frame of reference. And I'm currently working with a dancer on a poetry collaboration, which is to do with Cynghanedd, the Welsh form, medieval form of poetry. So, and I came back to Llwyn Celyn. Last year I was interviewed for Welsh TV channel Prynhawn Da, and so I'm comfortable in Welsh now. And I felt comfortable being in that house in Welsh. The language felt like it belonged again. I don't know, that might sound a little woolly, but it felt right,
Oh, well, I'm glad it sort of feels more Welsh to you now than perhaps it did at the beginning.
Yes, and what I came to understand was that that's all steeped in the history and battling and, Glyndŵr and various changing of hands and things like that. So maybe I was picking up on that. But and I really like the fact that, in the Beast House, which I think you've done an absolutely beautiful job of, it looks so gorgeous. It's, and worth a visit for anybody, even if you're not staying at Llwyn Celyn, you can go walk and then go visit this interpretation room. But that you also commissioned Mena Elfyn to translate some of my poems, and it was fitting that it was her because she's so fantastic. But that the Welsh really has a stamp now, as it should and as it did and would have had on the house, and for visitors to feel that more Welsh presence, I suppose, when they come.